Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Hong Konger on the home side, half Japanese on the away side, and both of the breweries involved in this one have featured on the channel several times before. When it comes to the Hong Kong brewery, I would say that they are fairly well rounded, but probably my go-to beers from them would be their German style lagers. Those are very good and very authentic in my opinion, whereas the Japanese brewery are most definitely best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, although I have noticed they've been diversifying their output over the last little while, but a very well respected brewery in Japan these days. But the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I have had from both breweries before. It's one that I know both breweries can do very, very well, but it also has a little bit of a twist to it that I don't think I've had from this particular sub-style before. So I think that could make it quite interesting, and that's what you want after 4,000 odd beer reviews. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for the home side of things then, like I said, we are going to stick to Hong Kong. We're going to go over to Hong Kong Island and Wong Chuk on the southern part of the island, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Young Master Brewery. So this particular beer is called Gerascophobia. It comes in at 6% ABV. It's a New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA, but brewed with a wine yeast, which I think could be quite interesting. Might have a little bit of an almost brute IPA type flavour profile to it in that regard. But this one is brewed in collaboration with Totopia, who are from Nagakute, just outside of Nagoya in Aichi prefecture over in Japan. But yeah, like I said, both of these breweries have featured on the channel a number of times before. We've had hazy IPAs from Young Master, which have been pretty solid, and we've had some very good ones as well from Totopia. But this is the first time, I think, on the channel that I've encountered a wine yeast being used in a New England hazy IPA. In a sense, it's a little bit unusual, but it's not something I would put past the Japanese brewers, to be honest, because sour IPA seems to be quite a popular style over there, and Totopia have experimented with that in the past, as have a number of other Japanese brewers too. So not surprised about this beer from the Japanese perspective, but generally speaking it's a little bit unusual for the hazy IPA style. So we'll just need to crack on and see what this one is all about. But like I say, after 4,200 reviews, you want something a bit more unusual. But yeah, two very good breweries, and I hope they produce a very nice beer here. Let's crack on then and see what it's going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done from both Young Master Brewery and from Totopia, and we will no doubt add more to both of those lists at some point in the fairly near future. But there's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So go in there, use the little search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beer from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Hong Kong playlist and the Japanese playlist, since it is kind of dual nationality. But do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days, even if I do say so myself. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Young Master first then, since they are the home brewery in this case. So yeah, Young Master Brewery was founded back in 2013 by Rohit Dugar, who is originally from New Delhi in India. So he has a background in the finance sector, and he worked in New York for a number of years, which is where he was kind of exposed to craft beer, from what I understand. But then he moved to Hong Kong in 2011 and was working for Goldman Sachs before he got tired of the rat race and decided to quit and found his own microbrewery. So he was joined at the brewery in the early days by the German brewer Ulrich Altbauer, who had quite an extensive experience of brewing in China, and he was the master brewer until he suddenly and sadly died in 2016. The current brew team at the brewery though is Edwin and Brian, who worked under Ulrich, and they've been working for the brewery for a good number of years. But the first brewery they had was in Aichi, and this facility had a 10 hectolitre brew house, and it acted as their main production until mid-2016. And apparently it was just after they moved everything over to their new facility that Ulrich passed away. So they opened up the new brewery in Wong, Chuk. It has a 40 hectolitre brew house from GEA in Germany, as well as a larger barrel aging area, and they also have a fodder in there as well for producing sour beers. And they were the first brewery anywhere in Asia to have one of these big sort of Belgian style oak fodders, in fact. So a real pioneering brewery, we have to say. The latest figure that I found for this brewery in terms of their brewing capacity is 15,000 litres of beer per month, but I would not be surprised if that's a little bit out of date, because they have been producing quite a few different things in recent times. This includes their highballs, which are sold under the name Higher Than, and they recently launched a beer as well called Young Master Grand, which seems to be their take on a premium lager, you know, sort of macro beer type thing, and that's going to be sold in different restaurants around Hong Kong. I guess they're trying to compete with Blueger a little bit, which is quite nice to see. It's cool to see that one of the craft breweries is going to have a go and see what they can do there, because in a territory like Hong Kong, you probably could make a good go of it. But they've got several tap rooms and restaurants these days. This includes TAP in Mong Kok, Second Draft at Victoria Park over in Causeway Bay, and then they've got Pub 1842 in Central. All of these are, of course, in Hong Kong. They previously had another tap venue at Chung Wan, which is a little bit to the north of me, up in the New Territories, and they had the Alvy's Pizzeria in Kennedy Town over on the island too, and then another bar called The Guild down in Singapore. I think it was in Tanjong Pagar, if I remember the area correctly. But those three sadly shut down. I can't remember when the TAP in Chung Wan shut down, but the other two have shut down within the last 18 months or so. But yeah, today these guys are the largest craft brewery by volume in Hong Kong. They have also been the most decorated craft brewery in the territory for quite a wee while. Whether they still are, I'm not quite sure, because a lot of the other breweries have been winning awards and things like that recently. But yeah, as of April 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 300 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they now employ in the region of 20 people. So yeah, a really nice company. Rohit is a very nice guy if you meet him, so I'm hoping that I can get him on the channel for a Meet the Brewer at some point. So I need to write to him and try and organise that, because that was something he did say he was willing to do at some point. So fingers crossed we can get that to happen at some stage. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Young Master Brewery for the moment. These guys are a very nice brewery. If you like your German lagers, you're going to enjoy what this brewery has to offer, and they do a number of other things as well. So if you want to learn more, check out the brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's go on to the Japanese side of things then. So Totopia Brewery, as I mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Nagakute in Aichi Prefecture, which is just out to the east of Nagoya, and the brewery was founded back in 2022, and it is the latest venture of the team behind Beer Pub Brick Lane in Nagoya. So Beer Pub Brick Lane was founded back in 2014 by Junya Morita and his wife Akiko, along with 3 friends, and it's become a really well-known beer and burger spot in the city. So the following year, they started the Nagoya Craft Beer Map, and they started market research in the US in order to form their own import company, which began importing American beers to Japan back in 2017. They then opened their own beer shop, which is known as Used Like New Beer. That opened in 2018, and this also acts as a sandwich shop as well. But at this point, they decided they wanted to get into brewing beer, and they started planning to form their own brewery, and they chose the name Totopia as a combination of the Japanese word toto, which means like precious, valuable, revered, something like this, and the English word utopia. You know, everybody knows what that means. But the location of the brewery had originally been planned as Seto City, but this had to be changed suddenly, and they found the current plot of 600 square meters of land in Nagakute, which is to the east of Nagoya City, and the brewery released their first beers during the second half of 2022. But they plan to focus on using local ingredients where possible in their beers, and they've also been harvesting their own hops a little bit, and over the last couple of years they've been building up a very good reputation for themselves. They've been getting their beers all across Japan and further afield, you know, to Korea, in Hong Kong and things like this, and they've been doing it very well. They've been diversifying a little bit because much of their focus originally was on like New England hazy IPAs and stuff like this, but they have been doing a few lagers and darker beers and things like that in recent times, which has been very nice to see. So hopefully we can try more of those for you on the channel at some point soon. But yeah, as of April 2025, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 160 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. Like I mentioned, a number of those, or quite a lot of those, are New England hazy IPAs, but they're starting to produce a few more things. But Totopia are one of the Japanese breweries that I would highly recommend that you check out. All of their beers tend to have the name Phobia. You know, it's kind of almost, you could almost say that the guys at Totopia are a little bit scared of everything when it comes to the name of their beers. But yeah, very nice brewery, and one that I highly recommend you check out if you're interested in Japanese craft beer. So yeah, that's everything I can tell you about them. Check out their brewery website, follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a wee bit more about all the different beers that they've done. You can also check out my video that I did with my friend Jordan from Jordan in Japan. We went to Beer Pub Brick Lane and tried some of the Totopia beers at Source, which was very, very cool. But yeah, let's crack on then and actually have a little look at this beer itself, because I am very, very curious about this one. So I'll let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. I should point out that I think there is a Japanese version of this one as well. I think Totopia actually brewed this at their own brewery too, but this one I'm drinking is obviously the Hong Kong brewed version, but I think I saw this one when I was in Japan a couple of months back. But yeah, really nicely presented. This one, you can see the Young Master symbol at the top of the can there, and there is of course the Totopia symbol, and yeah, you can see the familiar Young Master pants on the front of this can. Plain silver top, 330 millilitres, and it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. So it says Gerascophobia, an excessive and irrational fear of growing older and aging, which kind of makes sense for an IPA. You want to drink these fresh. And it says number 2, a hazy IPA collaboration between Young Master and Totopia from Japan, mixed fermented with wine yeast and lavishly hopped with Equinox, Enigma and Eclipse, a tried and tested remedy against anxiety when contemplating the process of aging. Yeah, I quite like that. But yeah, the hops in this one then, as we've just said, you've got Equinox from the US, which is 14% alpha acid, if I remember rightly, gives you that big, quite pungent, limey character. Enigma is from Australia. I want to say that Enigma is 16% alpha acid, and it gives you this kind of gooseberry and sort of red berry type character. A very interesting hop that you don't see all that often these days. And Eclipse is a newer hop, also from Australia if I'm not mistaken, but it gives you a lot of orangey character and quite a little bit of pine resin. Quite high in its alpha acid too. I saw that it can go up to about 18% actually. So yeah, this one should be quite different. Those hops I think should match kind of interestingly with the wine yeast that's in this. So let's get it out into the glass then and see what it's all about. 6% hazy IPA, this one, with a mixed fermentation with a bit of wine yeast in it. So yeah, this should be quite unusual, and that's what you want. So let's get it out into the glass and see how we go. So, well, you can see this one's poured pretty pale, but yeah, the head is disappearing very, very quickly. Didn't quite expect it to disappear that fast, but you could see the beer poured with about a half to a 2/3 finger of a kind of bubbly, soapy, perfect white head, but that has of course faded away to be pretty much nothing there. But you can see a good little bit of carbonation just breaking the surface of the liquid on this beer, and a few bubbles sticking around the side of the glass there. 1 or 2 bubbles sticking toward the edges of the glass too, but yeah, the carbonation is certainly visible, but it doesn't look as if it's going to be over carbonated or anything like that. But I will say the colour of this beer is very, very pale in fact. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well. But when it comes to different kinds of IPA, it's not often that you really have to care about those 2 variables, if you like. But certainly a kind of pale sort of pineapple-y juice colour. This one of the palest New Englands I've seen over the last little while. Not sure exactly why that would be, in all honesty. Maybe the yeast or something, but still, it looks pretty nice. This one, we have seen hazy IPAs this colour before. You can see it is actually, for a 6%er, it's actually fairly soupy. There's a wee bit of sediment just at the bottom of the glass here. I think you guys can see that on the camera. I haven't had this beer all that long, to be honest with you. I think about 2 months or so, and it has been kept in the fridge. Maybe my fridge is a little bit too cold for it, I don't know. But yeah, there's a wee bit of sediment in this one, but it certainly is kind of soupy and gloopy. Yes, there's a lot of opacity to this. So yeah, remember, the level of haziness in these beers depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use. That can vary from beer to beer and brewery to brewery, of course. But I don't think we really need to say anything else about the appearance of this beer. We can go on and have a wee look at the aroma of it and just see what it's all about. I'm very curious about this one, like I said, so let's do it. Oh, that smells really nice, actually. I will say that about it. Very kind of fragrant and floral New England IPA, and the malt base is really interesting in this one as well. It's very, very smooth, actually. And you can smell a little bit of the influence of the wine yeast in this one. It just gives the beer a wee bit of a more kind of oily type character. But yeah, good green component to this one. Lovely oily fruits and quite an interesting malt base. So yeah, I really like the aroma of this one. It's actually quite striking. So yeah, anyway, when it comes to hazy IPAs, as I've said, there are 6 elements to think about when it comes to the malty and yeasty side of these beers. You get the kind of rye lean and grainy side of things and the farmhousey yeasty type character. Those 2 elements are a bit more common in the New England brewed New England IPAs, because this style did of course start off as a farmhouse IPA, but as the style has moved away and gone to other places, the focus is more on wheaty bitiness, oaty creaminess, barley malt bread, and also the sweeter side of things. For me, this beer comes across as having a really nice balance between the more bitey, wheaty notes and also the barley malt, and a nice little bit of oaty, creamy character as well. There's a wee touch of sweetness to this one too, but the malty and yeasty side of this one is really nice, actually. So let's just break down that aroma and describe it for you more in depth. So the backbone of this beer is absolutely that kind of fresh white bready bread crust. There's a wee hint of woodiness in there, wee bit of cracker. There is a little bit of that typical kind of sweet wholemeal brown bready character that you can get from these beers very often. But yeah, overall the aroma of this one is really, really interesting, actually. Above that kind of brown bready character, you get a more fluffy and fresh white bready note out of it. You can smell a more dense wheaty white bready character to it. The wheat in this one is actually very smooth. It just shows you like a little touch of bitiness at the back of the nose. And then yeah, on top of that, you've got the oaty character coming out of the beer. Now, as I've often said in New England IPA reviews, when it comes to this style, the oats can often be a kind of rough indicator of how fresh your beer is. Essentially, the fresher the beer is, the creamier the oats are, the older the beer is, the drier they are. And this one, as I say, this beer is a couple of months old at the time of filming. But it's interesting because the oats are still coming across as really quite creamy and very, very smooth. There's just a little touch of dryness coming out of them in the aroma. At least we'll see how that comes to pass in the flavour of the beer. But yeah, on top of that, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy type flavour, aroma, sorry, but there's not too much in the way of sweetness. You can just smell that little bit of sweeter character coming out of it. Little tiny hint of like McVitie's digestive biscuit coming out of the beer too. But yeah, all in all, the way this one goes together, I think, is really quite nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me on the malty side of things. The yeasty side of the beer is quite interesting because it comes out at the back of the nose, and you do get this kind of, it's like quite a sweet white bread, but of course it's got a wee touch of crackery and grainy character to it, which I find very, very interesting. So certainly noticing that coming out of the beer, which I do like, actually. But I'm not getting so much in the way of, there's a little bit of like a white grapey kind of note to this one, and I'm guessing they would use a white wine yeast in this particular beer because it would just make more sense with the flavour profile. But it actually reminds me of some of the New England IPAs I had from Totopia Brewery in Gothenburg in Sweden, where they used a bit of rice in the malt base, and it just has that little bit of kind of almost oily ricey character to the aroma. So yeah, the yeasty side of this one's quite interesting. I think we're going to get more out of the flavour when it comes to that wine yeasty side of things than we're going to get from the aroma. But yeah, malty yeasty side of this beer is really very, very nice. So let's focus on the hoppy and fruity side of things then before we taste the beer. As I've said in many an IPA review before, there are 3 types of hoppings that you can do when it comes to these IPAs. There is early edition hopping, which takes place within the first hour of the wort boil. That gives you mostly bitterness and a deep dank green component. You've got late edition hopping, which takes place within the latter half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. Then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. That's all about flavour and aroma, and it gives you a very bright green component once again. New England IPAs tend to rely on late edition and dry hopping, which is why they're softer and more juicy. West Coast IPAs use all 3, which is why they're a bit deeper, danker, and more oily and bitter, if you like. The green component in this one, I have to say, is very, very nice. It's very bright and fragrant, but it also comes across as being a little bit oily, and I'm wondering if that's the influence of the wine yeast in this one. But there's a teeny little bit of earthiness in there, lovely, bright, but as I say, very oily and smooth floral aromaticity, and you've got a wee bit of a kind of zesty, grassy character coming out of this beer as well. But yeah, the green component is really nice and smooth and oily in this one, in fact. So again, it gets a big thumbs up from me. So, yeah, I like that about this beer, that's for sure. Yeah, green component is very, very nice. Don't think there's anything else we really need to say about it, to be honest. But yeah, in terms of the fruity side of things then, for me, there's a lot of gooseberry to this one, and I think that's going to be the enigma that's giving you that. Enigma, I remember having that lovely oily gooseberry sort of thing. It was almost in between Hallertau Blanc and Nelson Sauvin, so a lot of gooseberry character coming out of this one for me. You do notice at the front of the nose a little bit of the more limey character mixing with the grassy esters, and that'll be Equinox. And there's a wee bit of that sweeter orangey character, which will be the Eclipse as well. The thing, you know, I do get a little bit of that red curranty character, which I remember from Enigma 2, but really, I think the orange, I think, takes a back seat to the gooseberry in this one, in all honesty. But it really does, yeah, it's gooseberry that jumps out of this one for me, in all honesty. Although the more I smell of it, yeah, I do get more of the orange and lime. But regardless, the aroma of this one, I think, is very, very nice, and I'm really quite curious about this, in all honesty. So yeah, as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it is about time that we taste this one then and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Gerascophobia, a 6% hazy IPA with a wine yeast used in it, from Young Master Brewery in Wong, Chuk on Hong Kong Island, brewed in collaboration with Totopia from Nagakute, Aichi Prefecture near Nagoya over in Japan. Let's get stuck into this one and see what we have. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kanpai. Ooh. Now I will say, flavour-wise, this beer is really, again, very, very nice. I'm finding it a little touch drier than some of the other New England IPAs that I've had from either brewery. And I think that could, and I'm also feeling, you know, there's just something about the mouthfeel here, where there's a bit of wheaty bitiness coming out of it, of course, as well. But yeah, I think the wine yeast is really affecting the mouthfeel rather than anything else. It just has a little bit of like slickness and stuff that you might expect of wine rather than beer. But yeah, flavour profile wise, this is pretty damn nice. So yeah, I do like how that pieces together this one. It's a bit of an unusual beer. Can't think of any other ones that I've had recently that I could compare this to, but it is pretty damn nice, I have to say. Quite a wheaty leaning New England IPA, in fact. And I think that suits it. You have got a nice kind of little bit of bitterness coming out of this one. But yeah, the wheat, the barley malt, and the kind of green component are the things that really stand out about this one, in my opinion. So yeah, it's good stuff. Let's just break this beer down then and describe it for you more in depth, as we always do. So we'll go to the middle third of your palate then. The backbone of the beer, you have that lovely fresh white bready bread crust in this one. As you move further forward, there's a little bit of a woody character coming out of it, but that's very minimal, of course. Then you've got that Jacob's cream crackery layer, and then above that it's all about the bready kind of characteristics. There's maybe a little hint of a kind of sweeter brown bready character sitting on top of the cracker, but it's not too apparent, in all honesty. So yeah. But yeah, the way that it goes together in that regard is nice, but above that slightly brown bready layer, you have a more kind of fluffy barley malt white bready layer coming out of this one, and the bready character actually comes across as being a little bit drier, almost, which is interesting. Maybe they're using German malt in this one. There could be a little bit of Pilsner malt in this as well. I wouldn't be surprised about that, actually, in the case of this beer, because it just feels lighter and more crisp in a way. So yeah, you've got that barley malt white bread in there. Above that, I do feel there's just a little bit of an almost Pilsner malty crispness. As I've often said, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back, and that's definitely noticeable in this beer. Like, you really get that. And on top of the kind of Pilsner malty layer that I'm talking about, that's where you get the wheaty side of things. The wheaty bitiness really comes out further back on the palate, and it's quite smooth further forward as well. But on top of that, there's a little bit of an oaty presence there, but I don't feel the oats play too big a role in this beer, in all honesty. So down the middle line of your palate, you can feel there's a little touch of an oaty creaminess there, but yeah, as you move out toward the edges of your palate, there's just that little bit of oaty dryness. And in the dead centre of your palate, there's just that little circle there where you get the kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of flavours. That's the alcohol, of course, and it's just surrounded by a little hint of biscuit. So yeah, middle third of the palate on this one is quite interesting, actually. It's not quite what I was expecting from the aroma, in a sense, but yeah, the wheaty character really comes out of this into the aftertaste. So let's go to the back third of your palate then. As I've often said, the back third of your palate will give you very similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So yeah, the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. There's the wee touch of brown bread in the base, the big fluffy barley malt white bready character in there, bit of the Pilsner malty crispness, or what I suspect is Pilsner malty crispness, and then you've got the more wheaty bitey character just sitting above that. But yeah, the base of that back third of your palate is like a fresh white bready bread crust. There's a Jacob's cream crackery sort of character above that. You can feel there is a slightly more noticeable layer of a slightly sweet wholemeal brown bready character in there. Then you have a more fluffy barley malt white bready layer out of this one, and then you have a more then you've got a more kind of Pilsner malty crisp layer coming out of the beer, and then on top of that it's a wee bit more of a kind of, you get the more kind of wheaty bitey sort of notes coming out of the beer. So yeah, the way that malty side of the beer goes together is really, really quite nice. So yeah, the yeasty side of this beer, for me is kind of, there's a little bit of an interesting point to it, because the Pilsner malt and the wheaty bitiness really give the beer that wee bit of pungency and flavour, but the yeast almost takes a little bit of a back seat. It feels it's not quite as prominent in terms of the flavour as I've had from other beers in this style category. But yeah, it feels there's just a little touch of like a sweet wholemeal brown bread at its core, a little bit of white bread around that, and a wee bit of bread crust, but it almost just feels a little bit more oily and kind of grapey in a sense, which I'm guessing is because of the wine yeast. And yeah, you do get a little bit of that kind of white, green, grapey sort of flavour on top at the back of the palate, the further into the aftertaste that you go with this one. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. But definitely, yeah, back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, the beer just kind of, the flavour just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But I think we've covered the malty and yeasty side of the beer at this point, so let's go on to the hoppy side of things. Now I will say this beer does have a little bit of a bitterness to it, but I think that's kind of pushed by the kind of wheaty bitiness that the beer has overall, but I like it, I certainly do. The back corners of the palate, there's a little touch of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a wee hint of like woody, herbally character, maybe a wee bit of pine resin in the middle of the sides of your palate, but as you reach the front corners of your tongue, it's definitely a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic and things like that. So yeah, quite a nice little bit of floral aromatic spice there. Then round the front curve of your tongue, the beer is just that little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, nice little bit of zestiness to that grassiness as well. But let's round off the flavour section then with a wee quick look at the front third of your palate then and that fruity side of things. So yeah, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of kind of bready build up in there. The brown bread's in the base, the kind of white bready barley malts in the middle. There's a wee bit of the Pilsner malt on top of that. Then you've got the more wheaty bitey sort of thing. And then yeah, the front third of your palate, the base of that is the fresh white bready bread crust. You've got the cracker, the brown bread, the fluffier white bready layer from the barley malt, a slight little bit of dry white bread from the Pilsner as well, then the smoother wheat, and you can feel a little touch of the creamy oats coming forward in this one. But as I say, this beer is not really creamy. The oats actually become more and more porridgey, I think, into the aftertaste rather than anything else. But yeah, on top of all of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a little look at that then, because this is the most quirky part of the beer, I would say. It's quite an unusual hop bill in this one. Equinox, Eclipse and Enigma, Triple E. So yeah. So yeah, for me, the fruity side of this beer, again, it's a lot of gooseberry that I get out of this one. I think the Enigma is really sticking out for me, and from what I remember, Enigma was, you know, Cashmere was another hop that could always dominate whatever you put it with. But yeah, I feel the Enigma is kind of dominating in this one, but into the aftertaste you get more of the orangey character from the Eclipse, and there's a wee bit of the liminess kind of sits underneath there too. So yeah, if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, it feels like it's a little bit more kind of, yeah, it feels a little bit more kind of gooseberry-like. So yeah, a good little bit of gooseberry in there. And as you move further forward into the front half of that front third of your tongue, it feels, yeah, quite orangey from the Eclipse. And then just as you reach the very front tip of the tongue, you're getting the limey notes from the Equinox. And I do get into the aftertaste, there's a little bit of a kind of juicy, red curranty, almost strawberry type flavour at this one. Although strawberry is a little bit more, you know, Strata would be the one. Enigma's always reminded me of the Strata kind of flavour a little bit. But yeah, Enigma, the gooseberry really lingers for me into the aftertaste for this one. But yeah, a little bit of orange, quite a kind of oily orange actually, but yeah, quite a lot of limey character mixing in with the grassy esters into the aftertaste too. So all in all, quite an interesting beer, this one. The green component's quite big, the wheaty bitiness is quite big, and then yeah, the limey characters linger there too. But yeah, juicy gooseberry and orangey characteristics into the aftertaste too. Yeah, interesting stuff, that's for sure. Let's round off this review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So yeah, for me, yeah, mouthfeel wise, this beer is a little bit different. Again, as you often get with young master brewery, it feels like very clean, The carbonation is quite smooth, but it offers a degree of crispness. But yeah, nice kind of clean slickness to this one, and yeah, it's quite clean, quite slick, and you have a really nice kind of dryness to this beer into the aftertaste, I would say. Yeah, very drinkable, but I think it's fair to describe this one as being kind of bottom end of mid-bodied. I think that's where we put it on the spectrum. In terms of the IBU with this one, this is kind of an interesting point. I feel this beer's got a little bit of kind of lingering pine resin and floral aromaticity into the aftertaste. So yeah, maybe about 50 or 60 IBUs coming out of this one, but I think the wheaty bitiness and the floral kind of pine resiny notes kind of sit there into the aftertaste as well. And then yeah, the so yeah, a bit more bitterness this beer, 50-60 IBUs. The malt base is a bit drier underneath, smoother in the middle, drier again on top because of the Pilsner malt, and there's just a little touch of kind of smoothness and sweetness sitting on top of that. And then yeah, you've got a lovely juicy fruity character to this one, but again, drier and more bitey into the aftertaste. All in all, a very interesting New England IPA, this one, and the wine yeast, I think, gives you this little bit of oily, grapey character just sitting on top of the beer overall. So yeah, I think they've done a really interesting job of this and created something a little bit different, but a very enjoyable beer, this actually. So I would recommend that you try it if you get the chance. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This one was the Gerascophobia, a 6% New England Hazy IPA brewed at Young Master Brewery in Wong, Chuk on Hong Kong Island in collaboration with Totopia from Nagakute in Aichi Prefecture, very close to Nagoya in Japan. 6% hazy IPA with a wine yeast used, and a really interesting beer. Give that a go for yourself and see what you think. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Young Master and Totopia.